What happens when ignorance meets discipline? When prejudice collides with preparation? When bullies target someone they believe is defenseless, only to discover they've chosen the wrong person entirely? Picture this. A quiet, 16-year-old black girl walks through the hallways of Jefferson High School, her head held high despite the whispers that follow her every step. To her classmates, she appears vulnerable, an easy target. They see her silence as weakness, her calm demeanor as submission. They couldn't be more wrong. This is the story of Maya Chen Williams, a young woman whose journey from victim to victor illuminates one of the most pressing issues in American education today: the systematic targeting and criminalization of black girls in our schools. It's a story that exposes the harsh reality of racist bullying, where 31.5% of high school students report experiencing racism at school, with black students facing it at nearly 3 times the rate of their white peers. But Maya's story is also one of empowerment, a testament to how martial arts training can transform not just physical capability, but mental resilience, self-confidence, and the ability to stand up against injustice. In a world where black girls are suspended at 5 times the rate of white girls and account for 45% of all suspensions, despite representing only 15% of female students, Maya's journey offers both sobering truth and inspiring hope. This isn't just another feel-good story about standing up to bullies. This is a deep dive into systemic racism, the psychology of empowerment, and how one young woman's quiet strength sparked a revolution in her school, and possibly in yours too. Her story matters because it reveals how preparation, discipline, and inner strength can triumph over prejudice and hate. Maya Chen Williams grew up in the diverse Riverside community of Oakland, California, where her Chinese mother, Dr. Susan Chen, worked as a pediatric surgeon, and her black father, Marcus Williams, served as a community social worker. From an early age, Maya embodied the beautiful complexity of her mixed heritage. Her father's warm brown skin and expressive eyes combined with her mother's delicate features and straight black hair that she often wore in protective styles. The Chen Williams household was one of quiet strength and intentional preparation. When Maya turned 8, her parents made a decision that would prove life-changing. They enrolled her in Master Lu's traditional karate academy, a small dojo tucked in between a Vietnamese restaurant and a barber shop on International Boulevard. This wasn't a recreational choice. It was a survival strategy. In this world, our daughter will face challenges that other children won't, Susan Chen had told her husband one evening after Maya came home from school with stories of classmates pulling at her hair and making comments about her weird lunch. She needs to be prepared, not just physically but mentally and spiritually. Master Lu, a 67-year-old Okinawan karate expert who had immigrated to the United States in the 1970s, understood the unique challenges facing young people of color. His dojo served primarily black and Latino families from the surrounding neighborhoods, many of whom brought their children not for sport, but for survival. Karate-do, he would tell his students in his gentle, accented English, is not about fighting. It is about never having to fight. It is about carrying yourself with such confidence, such inner peace that conflict finds no home in your presence. For 8 years, Maya absorbed these teachings. She learned the precise footwork of kata, the explosive power of kumite, and the meditative breathing of mokuso. But more importantly, she internalized the philosophical foundations of martial arts that research consistently shows build self-confidence, emotional regulation, and resilience against bullying. Studies document that martial arts training increases self-esteem, reduces anxiety, and develops what psychologists call cognitive and affective self-regulation, the ability to remain calm and think clearly under pressure. By age 16, Maya had earned her second-degree black belt, but her greatest education happened outside the dojo. Growing up as a mixed-race child in Oakland meant navigating complex identity questions daily. At Chinese New Year celebrations with her mother's family, some relatives questioned her blackness. In predominantly black spaces with her father's community, others challenged her authenticity as a black person. School became another battleground entirely. Maya's family moved to the predominantly white suburb of Walnut Creek when her mother received a promotion to chief of pediatric surgery at the regional medical center. The transition from Oakland's diversity to Walnut Creek's homogeneity hit Maya like cold water. Jefferson High School, with its manicured campus and 73% white student body, represented a different kind of challenge. Here, her mixed heritage made her exotic rather than familiar, and her quiet confidence was interpreted as arrogance. The statistics Maya unknowingly joined painted a grim picture. According to the CDC, Black students experience racism in schools at a rate of 45.9%, compared to just 17.3% for white students. For mixed-race students like Maya, the rate climbs to 48.8%. The health impacts are severe. Students experiencing racism are more than twice as likely to consider suicide and significantly more likely to experience poor mental health, persistent sadness, and engage in risky behaviors. In the affluent halls of Jefferson High, Maya found herself studying not just chemistry and calculus, but the subtle and overt manifestations of privilege and prejudice. Classmates would touch her hair without permission, ask inappropriate questions about her parents' relationship, and make comments about her being pretty for a mixed girl. Teachers, while not overtly hostile, often held her to different standards, viewing her natural assertiveness through the lens of adultification bias, which leads adults to perceive Black girls as less innocent and more mature than their white peers. Unknown to her classmates, Maya's quiet demeanor masked 8 years of rigorous physical and mental training. While they saw a potential victim, Maya carried herself with the centered awareness of a martial artist, alert, balanced, and prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. October 15th started like any other Tuesday at Jefferson High School. Maya sat alone at her usual lunch table in the courtyard, methodically eating the homemade char siu bao her mother had packed, while reading ahead in her AP history textbook. She had grown accustomed to eating alone, not by choice, but by circumstance. The social cliques at Jefferson seemed impermeable to someone who didn't fit neatly into their predetermined categories. The trouble began with Brandon Mitchell, a senior linebacker whose father owned several car dealerships across the East Bay. Brandon embodied the particular type of casual racism that thrives in affluent suburban schools, not the overt hatred of extremist groups, but the entitled assumption that spaces and people existed for his amusement. His usual targets were underclassmen who couldn't fight back, but lately, he had fixated on Maya with an intensity that made her friends from Oakland warn her to be careful. "Look at Princess China eating her weird food again," Brandon announced, to his table of athletes and hangers-on, his voice carrying across the courtyard with practiced projection. "Bet she thinks she's better than everyone else with her fancy doctor mommy." Maya had learned to ignore such comments. A coping strategy research shows is common among Black students who experience disproportionate bullying. The data is stark. Black students comprise 37% of bullying victims despite being only 15.1% of the student population. For mixed-race students, the targeting often intensifies as bullies exploit their ambiguous racial identity. But Brandon wasn't content with verbal harassment. As Maya rose to throw away her lunch, he called out, "Hey, China, where you going? Don't you want to teach us some kung fu?" His friends erupted in laughter, mimicking exaggerated martial arts. Poses they'd seen in movies. Maya paused, her breath deepening automatically, a technique Master Liu had drilled into her for managing emotional turbulence. "My name is Maya," she said quietly, her voice carrying despite its soft tone. "And kung fu is Chinese. I practice karate, which is Okinawan." "Listen to Miss Encyclopedia trying to educate us," Brandon sneered, standing up. At 6'2" and 220 pounds, he towered over Maya's 5'6" frame. "What you gonna do if I don't care about your karate? You gonna karate chop me?" He chopped the air mockingly, his friends recording with their phones. This moment exemplified what education researchers call the intersection of racism and sexism that particularly targets Black girls. Maya faced what experts term the perfect storm of discrimination. Racial harassment combined with gender-based aggression, and the assumption that she would either submit or react in a way that would justify further punishment. Maya turned to leave, but Brandon wasn't finished. "Did I say you could walk away from me?" he said, stepping into her path. "I think Princess China owes us an apology for being rude." The courtyard had gone silent. Teachers were nowhere to be seen, a common occurrence during lunch period that, studies show, contributes to the hostile environment many black students face. Maya found herself surrounded by Brandon and 3 of his friends, their circle tightening with predatory intent. "I don't owe anyone an apology for existing," Maya said, her voice remaining steady despite her accelerating heartbeat. "Master Liu's training echoed in her mind. First, seek to avoid conflict. Second, attempt de-escalation. Third, if unavoidable, respond with appropriate force. Existing? Nah, you owe us for thinking you're special," Brandon said, reaching out to grab her backpack. "Let's see what other weird stuff Princess China brought to school." Maya stepped back smoothly, her movement so fluid it looked almost like dancing. "Please don't touch my property," she said, her tone remaining respectful but firm. Brandon's face flushed with anger. He wasn't used to being denied by anyone, especially not a quiet girl he had categorized as powerless. "What did you just say?" "To me." He lunged forward and grabbed the collar of Maya's sweater, yanking her toward him with enough force to make her stumble. In that instant, 8 years of training compressed into muscle memory. Maya's response was immediate, precise, and devastating. In its simplicity, she stepped into Brandon's pull rather than away from it, using his own force against him, a fundamental principle of Aikido she had cross-trained in. Her left hand came up to control his gripping hand, while her right hand found the pressure point just below his wrist. The combined movement, appearing to observers like she was simply adjusting her sweater, caused Brandon to release her immediately. A shooting pain ran up his arm. "Ow, what the—" Brandon jerked back, shaking his hand. "You grabbed me," Maya said simply, smoothing down her sweater. "I defended myself," Brandon's friends urged him on. "You gonna let her punk you like that?" One called out. Another added, "Show her what happens when she gets smart." Brandon charged forward, this time aiming to shove Maya to the ground. But Maya wasn't there when he arrived. She had shifted slightly to the side, and Brandon's momentum carried him past her. As he stumbled, Maya's foot was somehow in exactly the wrong place for him to step, sending him sprawling across the concrete. The entire sequence looked almost accidental to observers. Maya appeared to have simply moved to avoid him, while Brandon seemed to have tripped over his own feet. Only someone trained in martial arts would recognize the subtle tai sabaki, body shifting, and diashi barai, forward foot sweep, that Maya had executed with textbook precision. "Are you okay?" Maya asked genuinely, offering her hand to help Brandon up. "Maybe you should sit down for a moment." The offer of help, delivered with sincere concern, had an effect that raw aggression never could have achieved. Brandon found himself looking up at this girl he had tried to intimidate, her hand extended in kindness despite his attack. For the first time, he saw her not as a target, but as a human being who had just demonstrated both the power to hurt him and the character to choose mercy instead. I'm fine," he mumbled, ignoring her offered hand and scrambling to his feet. His friends looked confused. They had expected a fight, not whatever this was. "Brandon Mitchell, what is going on here?" The sharp voice of Vice Principal Johnson cut through the tension as he finally appeared on the scene. Drawn by student reports of a commotion, Maya stood perfectly still, her breathing controlled, her posture relaxed but alert. She had de-escalated, potentially violent confrontation, without throwing a single aggressive technique, embodying the highest principles of martial arts philosophy. But she also knew that in the twisted logic of school discipline that disproportionately punishes black girls, her moment of triumph might quickly become another statistic. The real test was just beginning. The aftermath of the incident revealed the insidious ways that institutional bias operates in schools. Despite multiple student witnesses confirming that Brandon had initiated physical contact, Vice Principal Johnson's initial response focused on Maya's inappropriate response to typical teenage behavior. The language choice was telling. Brandon's assault was reframed as normal adolescent interaction, while Maya's self-defense became the problem requiring intervention. "Miss Chen Williams," Johnson said during their meeting in his office later. That afternoon, "I understand you may have felt threatened, but we have a zero-tolerance policy regarding physical altercations. Fighting is fighting, regardless of who started it." Maya's parents arrived within the hour, having been called to school for a disciplinary conference. The meeting exemplified what research identifies as the systematic criminalization of black girls' responses to harassment. While Brandon received a one-day in-school suspension for horseplay, the administration recommended a 3-day out-of-school suspension for Maya for engaging in physical confrontation and escalating the situation. Escalating? Dr. Chen's voice carried the controlled fury of a surgeon who had spent years navigating predominantly white professional spaces. "My daughter was assaulted by a student who outweighs her by 60 pounds, and defending herself is escalation?" Marcus Williams, Maya's father, understood the deeper dynamics at play. His work in community social services had shown him countless examples of how black children, especially girls, were held to impossible standards. "Let me understand this correctly," he said, his voice steady but dangerous. "If my daughter submits to assault, she's weak and deserves targeting. If she defends herself, she's aggressive and deserves punishment. What exactly is the acceptable response to being attacked?" The school's position revealed what researchers call adultification bias, the tendency to perceive black girls as older, more mature, and less deserving of protection than their white peers. Studies show that black girls are viewed as more aggressive and less innocent, leading to harsher punishments for identical behaviors. Maya sat quietly throughout the meeting, observing the adults debate her fate. She thought about Master Lu's teachings on injustice. "When the system is broken, young warrior, you must decide whether to break yourself trying to fit into it, or to stand firm in your principles and work to change it." The Chen Williams family chose to fight. Dr. Chen contacted the ACLU, while Marcus reached out to black parent advocacy groups throughout the Bay Area. Within 48 hours, Maya's story had sparked a firestorm of community activism that Jefferson High School was completely unprepared to handle. The first sign of resistance came from an unexpected source: the student body itself. Jennifer Martinez, a Latina sophomore who had witnessed the entire incident, started a social media campaign using the hashtag #IStandWithMaya. Her video testimony, recorded on her phone and posted to TikTok, went viral within hours. "I saw everything," Jennifer said in her video. "Brandon Mitchell has been bullying students for years, and the school does nothing. But when Maya, a girl who has never started trouble with anyone, defends herself from being physically attacked, suddenly the school cares about violence? This is wrong, and we all know it." The video sparked a wave of testimonials from other students sharing their experiences with Brandon's bullying and the school's inconsistent discipline policies. Asian American students described racial harassment they had endured. Black students detailed being suspended for infractions that resulted in warnings for white classmates. Latina students shared stories of being dress-coded for clothing choices that white girls wore without consequence. Master Liu, despite his general preference for privacy, granted an interview to the local news station. His words were measured, but powerful. "Maya-chan has trained with me for 8 years. In all that time, she has never used her skills in anger, never sought conflict, never acted with anything but honor and respect. That she is being punished for protecting herself, while her attacker faces no consequences. This is not justice. This is not the American way." The broader martial arts community rallied around Maya's story. The Pacific Coast Karate Association, representing over 200 dojos across California, issued a statement supporting Maya's right to self-defense and condemning the school's disciplinary disparity. Local dojo owners offered to provide free self-defense classes for students at Jefferson High, forcing the administration to confront the uncomfortable reality that many students felt unsafe on their campus. But the most powerful resistance came from Maya herself. On the day of her scheduled suspension, she arrived at school in her GI, her karate uniform, with a sign that read, "I will not be silenced. I will not be criminalized. I will stand up for what is right." Word of her peaceful protest spread through social media, and by lunchtime, over 300 students had joined her in the courtyard, many wearing their own martial arts uniforms or athletic gear in solidarity. The image of Maya, small, composed, dignified, surrounded by a diverse group of teenagers refusing to accept injustice, became the defining photo of what local media dubbed the Jefferson High Uprising. The protest forced the school board to hold an emergency meeting that evening. The auditorium overflowed with parents, students, community activists, and martial arts instructors. Speaker after speaker testified about the culture of racial bias at Jefferson High and the urgent need for systemic change. Dr. Angela Foster, a psychologist specializing in adolescent development and racial trauma, provided expert testimony. When we punish children for defending themselves against racial harassment, we teach them that their safety doesn't matter, that their dignity is negotiable, and that the system will not protect them. The long-term psychological harm of this message cannot be overstated. The school board found itself facing not just a disciplinary dispute, but a community-wide reckoning with institutional racism. Maya's quiet strength had sparked something much larger than anyone anticipated. A movement demanding fundamental change in how schools protect and serve all their students. The question now was whether the system would bend toward justice, or whether Maya and her supporters would have to force it to break. The turning point came during the packed school board meeting on October 22nd, exactly 1 week after the incident. The Jefferson High Auditorium was standing room only, filled with students, parents, community leaders, and martial arts instructors from across the Bay Area. Local news cameras captured every moment as Maya's story transformed from a single instance of injustice into a broader referendum on systemic racism in education. Maya walked to the podium wearing her black belt prominently displayed over her school uniform. Her voice was steady as she addressed the 5-member school board, each word carefully chosen and delivered with the precision she had learned through years of martial arts training. "My name is Maya Chen Williams, and I am a 2nd-degree black belt in Shotokan Karate. 7 days ago, I was physically assaulted by a fellow student who had been verbally harassing me with racial slurs and stereotypes. When I defended myself using the minimum force necessary to ensure my safety, this school district chose to punish me more severely than my attacker." She paused, scanning the faces in the audience before continuing. "But this isn't really about me. This is about every student who has been told to turn the other cheek while facing racism. This is about every black girl who has been suspended for behavior that gets white students a warning. This is about a system that criminalizes our existence while protecting those who harm us." The room was absolutely silent as Maya continued. "Master Liu taught me that martial arts are not about fighting. They're about justice. Real justice means protecting the vulnerable, standing up for what's right, and never using power to harm others. I defended myself because I have the right to exist in this school without fear. I stand here today because we all have the right to an education free from harassment and discrimination." What happened next shocked everyone, including Maya herself. Brandon Mitchell stood up from the back of the auditorium and asked to speak. The teenager who had seemed so confident in his bullying appeared smaller now, his usual swagger replaced by visible discomfort. I want to apologize," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Not just to Maya, but to everyone in this room. What I did was wrong. The things I said were wrong. And the way this school handled it was wrong too." He looked directly at Maya. "I grabbed you, I called you names. I tried to humiliate you in front of everyone because I thought it would make me look cool. But when you defended yourself and then offered to help me up, that's when I realized what kind of person I really was, and what kind of person you are." Brandon's voice grew stronger. "Maya could have hurt me badly. She had every right to, but she chose mercy instead. That taught me more about strength and character than anything else in my life. The school wants to suspend her for defending herself while giving me a slap on the wrist for assault. That's not justice." The auditorium erupted in applause, but Brandon wasn't finished. I know saying, "Sorry doesn't fix what I did." But I want everyone to know that Maya Chen Williams is the strongest person in this school, and anyone who messes with students because of their race or who they are will have to deal with me too. The unexpected solidarity from her former tormentor shifted the entire dynamic of the meeting. Board member Dr. Patricia Reeves, an African-American woman who had been mostly silent during the proceedings, finally spoke. In 30 years of education, I have seen too many bright, talented students of color pushed out of schools for defending themselves against harassment that should never have been tolerated in the first place. Maya's case isn't unique. It's simply the one that finally got enough attention to force us to confront our failures. She looked directly at Superintendent Williams. We have a choice tonight. We can continue to perpetuate a system that criminalizes the victims while protecting the aggressors, or we can finally live up to our stated commitment to equity and justice for all students. The vote was unanimous. Maya's suspension was not only overturned but expunged from her record entirely. Brandon's punishment was increased to include mandatory counseling and community service focused on understanding the impact of racism. But more importantly, the board committed to immediate and comprehensive policy changes. The district would implement mandatory implicit bias training for all staff, create a new position for a director of equity and inclusion, establish a student-led bias reporting system, and partner with local martial arts schools to offer self-defense, classes focused on empowerment and conflict resolution. As Maya walked out of the auditorium that night, surrounded by supporters and accompanied by news crews, she felt the weight of transformation, not just her own, but her entire community's. She had entered Jefferson High as a quiet, mixed-race girl trying to navigate hostile hallways. She was leaving this meeting as a catalyst for systemic change, a young woman who had shown that strength, dignity, and principle could triumph over prejudice and injustice. Master Liu waited for her outside, his weathered face creased in a rare smile. "You have honored the way tonight, Maya-chan, but remember, this is not the end of your journey. It is only the beginning." 6 months after the incident that changed everything, Jefferson High School was barely recognizable. The transformation began immediately following the school board meeting, but the deeper changes took time to root and flourish. Maya found herself in an unexpected role as a student leader and advocate. The newly created Student Equity Council, which she co-chaired with Brandon Mitchell, a pairing that initially raised eyebrows but proved remarkably effective, became a powerful force for positive change. Their partnership demonstrated that genuine accountability and growth were possible, even after serious harm had been done. The mandatory implicit bias training for staff, initially met with resistance from some teachers and administrators, began yielding measurable results within the first semester. Suspension rates for Black and Latino students dropped by 40%, while reports of racist harassment decreased significantly thanks to the new anonymous reporting system and swift administrative response protocols. The partnership with local martial arts schools proved transformative in ways no one had anticipated. Master Liu and 5 other instructors began offering weekly self-defense classes that focused not just on physical techniques, but on conflict resolution, cultural understanding, and personal empowerment. The classes became so popular that the district expanded the program to 3 other high schools. "The goal is not to create fighters," Master Liu explained to parents at the program's inaugural demonstration. "The goal is to create young people who carry themselves with such confidence and inner peace that bullies find no target, and who possess the skills to protect themselves and others when necessary." Maya's academic performance, which had suffered during the stress of the incident and its aftermath, rebounded stronger than ever. Her essay about the intersection of martial arts philosophy and social justice earned her a full scholarship to UC Berkeley, where she planned to study both psychology and ethnic studies, with the goal of becoming an educational advocate and policy researcher. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in the daily culture of Jefferson High itself. Students began intervening when they witnessed harassment of any kind. The hallways that once felt hostile to many students of color became spaces where diversity was celebrated rather than merely tolerated. The ripple effects extended far beyond Jefferson High's campus. Maya's story, covered extensively by local and national media, inspired similar student-led movements across the country. The hashtag #IsStandWithMaya evolved into a broader campaign called Students Against Racism, connecting young activists fighting bias in schools from California to Connecticut. Dr. Angela Foster, the psychologist who had provided expert testimony during the school board meeting, published a research paper using Maya's case as a foundation for examining how martial arts training could serve as both individual empowerment and community healing tool. Her work influenced education policy discussions at the state level and contributed to new guidelines for addressing racial harassment in schools. Brandon Mitchell's transformation proved just as remarkable as Maya's emergence as a leader. His genuine commitment to making amends extended far beyond his required community service. He became a peer counselor, specializing in helping students understand the impact of their biases and behaviors. His willingness to publicly acknowledge his mistakes and work for change made him an unexpectedly powerful voice against racism among his white male peers. Maya didn't just defend herself that day, Brandon reflected during a school assembly marking the 6-month anniversary of the incident. She defended all of us. She showed us what it looks like to stand up for what's right, even when it's scary, even when the system is stacked against you. She made me a better person, and she made this whole school better. Maya's parents watched their daughter's growth with a mixture of pride and protectiveness. Dr. Chen continued her work as a surgeon, while also joining the school board to ensure lasting institutional changes. Marcus Williams expanded his community advocacy work to include educational equity issues, using his daughter's experience to push for policy changes throughout the district. Master Liu, despite his preference for staying out of the spotlight, found himself reluctantly famous as martial arts instructors across the country reached out for guidance on developing character-based training programs. His small dojo on International Boulevard became a pilgrimage site for educators interested in integrating martial arts philosophy into anti-bullying curricula. On the anniversary of the incident, Maya stood in the same courtyard where everything had changed. The lunch tables were arranged differently now. Students sat in mixed groups that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. The walls displayed student artwork celebrating diversity and quotes about justice and courage in multiple languages as she watched younger students eating lunch together, laughing and learning from each other across racial and cultural lines. Maya understood that her moment of standing up to Brandon had created something larger than personal vindication. It had created possibility, proof that schools could change, that communities could grow, and that young people armed with principle and courage could transform even the most entrenched systems. Maya Chen Williams' story illuminates a painful truth about American education. Too many of our schools remain spaces where racism thrives and where students of color, particularly black girls, face systemic bias that criminalizes their very existence. The statistics are stark and undeniable. Black girls receive suspensions at 5 times the rate of white girls. They account for 45% of all female suspensions, while representing only 15% of female students. They experience sexual harassment at rates of 67% and face adultification bias that strips away their childhood and presumption of innocence. But Maya's story also reveals something equally powerful: the transformative potential that lies within each of us. When we combine preparation with principle, when we ground ourselves in communities that build rather than tear down, and when we refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. The martial arts training that saved Maya wasn't just about physical techniques. It was about developing the mental strength to remain calm under pressure, the spiritual grounding to choose mercy over vengeance, and the unshakable confidence that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. Research consistently shows that martial arts training builds exactly these qualities in young people, making it a powerful tool for empowerment and resilience. Maya's transformation from victim to victor to advocate reminds us that change is possible when we refuse to accept the status quo. Her story challenges us to examine our own schools, our own communities, our own hearts. Are we creating spaces where all young people can thrive? Are we teaching our children to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult? Are we building the kind of society where a black girl's strength is celebrated rather than criminalized? The bullies grabbed Maya's collar thinking they had found an easy target. Instead, they discovered an unstoppable force for justice. Her story continues to inspire students, educators, and communities across the nation to ask the most important question of all: what will you do when faced with injustice? The choice, like Maya's choice in that courtyard, is yours. If you've been inspired by Maya's story, share it. Advocate for anti-bias training in your schools. Support martial arts programs that emphasize character development. Stand up when you witness harassment. Remember that change begins with each of us choosing courage over comfort, justice over silence, and hope over despair. Maya showed us the way. Now it's our turn to follow.